I'll call this Iowa City Community School Board meeting on Tuesday, April 21st, 2020 to order. And first up we have, thank you while I navigate. We will move into, sorry, I'm in the wrong agenda.
Communication update is first.
Thank you.
I can just jump in for you, Janet, while you're getting there. You'll see that this is all communication over the last 2 weeks because we didn't have a communication section for last week's meeting. So you can see it going all the way back to 4/8. Going to talk about at length in the next section, so we don't necessarily need to dwell on them right now, but are the messages that were out to elementary, junior high, and high school families today. Amy and Matt and Diane and Lisa are going to go through more details about content in each of those messages, but hopefully some of that content has responded to some of the inquiries that you've gotten from parents as they're looking for the what's next piece after the governor announced last Friday that school is going to be closed for the remainder of the year. So before Amy and Matt get started, I'd just like to express the collective appreciation for the teachers, the teacher leaders, our building principals, the district administrators who've been working on this over the course of the last couple of weeks. They've really been thoughtful about trying to balance the needs of providing educational opportunities for families and for students, and yet at the same time recognizing that each student and each family is in a unique position and they need to be able to make decisions about education for the next few weeks that are going to best meet their family's needs. And I think that the team's done a wonderful job really developing a continuum of opportunities that are available depending on the time, energy, and effort that each household has to put into education as they balance the other needs of their family the next few weeks. So recognize how the team, like I said, really come up with a good plan, detailed. So questions about messages that have gone out before we jump into the heart of the matter?
Hearing none. Steve, I think you're ready to move into teaching and learning update.
All right, turn it over to Amy and Matt and the rest of the team, and then they'll walk through both the teaching and learning update and the tech update, and then back with Amy and Matt, and we'll talk a little bit about the long running and what's next for. Okay.
All right, I think I get to go first. So good evening, everyone. The document I would just draw your attention to would be first the message to secondary families on required learning, and then the liftoff link in there that I'm sure many of you have spent some time looking at a little bit. And I won't read every piece to you, but I think a good summary is we really tried to look at where students left us prior to spring break, and were they failing their courses or were they passing their courses at that time. We'd completed a couple weeks of third trimester. And then as Steve said, we wanted to try to give a lot of options and a lot of opportunities for families, and also trying to respect their same situation or their family situation at this time, knowing, you know, we're in the middle of a global pandemic and that everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different, and make sure that we weren't doing harm to folks that were in the middle of that or had a little bit different road ahead of them than maybe some other families right now. And so we tried to create a lot of choice in there. Really, if the student was passing prior to break, they have the option to continue with online instruction in May, or this last week of April and May in the required format and earn a grade, or they could satisfy that course with a pass. If they were passing prior to break, they could just essentially take their pass at this time and be complete with the course. If they were failing that course prior to break, then of course they would need to continue in the instruction if they were able to receive a pass or to receive a letter grade of their choice. They could take either of those options. If they're not able to get that grade to a satisfactory fashion, then we would be withdrawing them from that course, and so that we wouldn't be failing anybody. There is some great flexibility given around the seniors and graduation requirements. And so that isn't necessarily the case though for freshmen through juniors. And so students that don't complete that course and need to withdraw, then we'll have to obviously work to try to catch those students up. But that's a critical part of our work here moving forward, as well as try to communicate to students, and if their grade wasn't satisfactory, and put them into that passing category prior to that spring break time to try to get them to pass this class here prior to the conclusion of the school year, and to make sure they're well aware of their options. So today, the change after that, the overall plan that went out, and I should probably ask you guys what's helpful, as well too for you, is if you do want me to walk through that in some further detail, if you want to ask some questions. But the second part of that high school parent communication today then was a survey that went out to them that they received to state their intent on which courses they're going to continue in that mandatory instruction phase 4, and which ones they potentially would want to stop with a pass or withdraw from. Junior high, we've also been doing communication the last couple days since the announcement of the closure for the rest of the school year. Junior high students are affected if they're in a high school credit bearing course. And so some of the junior high students in, say, algebra or geometry, foreign language courses, earth and space science, would also need to complete that intent form. Other junior high students, we tried to replicate the course expectations between the junior high and the high school, and that really affects the teachers on trying to deliver a similar experience even at the junior high level that follows that same format that you saw in the communication document with what those course expectations look like. That there's a videotape component or an asynchronous component, hearing from the teacher around some instruction, an assignment or activity that students could complete at home, and then some type of an assessment, that could be completed. The difference, of course, in the mandatory with the high school between that and the junior high, while those expectations seem similar, is there's no attendance and there's no grades for the junior high portion. So that third trimester, there's just no grade for the junior high classes that aren't high school credit bearing courses. So those documents contain a lot of information. I know it was, I don't think we're gonna sit here and say it wouldn't be overwhelming to families to see all that information and to have a lot of questions coming from that. But we tried to be as complete as we could in that communication. We did a webinar with teaching staff on Friday, so they were well informed ahead of this parent communication that went out on Monday, and then again today, and tried to answer their questions. We still have obviously questions we're working through, but I do think we met the needs of as many people as possible, as far as if they were hungry for a more rigorous experience, that they could continue that course and could continue to try to earn a grade, or the students and families that may just be overwhelmed in this situation right now, and that we didn't want to disadvantage them credit wise, and gave them an option that might work best for their family in that circumstance too. So I don't know if you guys would like me to provide some more detail in walking through those documents. It'd be a lot of sitting in and listening just to me, or if there's specific questions you maybe have that I could try to address on the secondary end, and point you to different places in that document as we talk tonight.
I don't know that we need to walk through the whole thing. I've got just a couple thoughts. One, I wanted to say thank you for I think it was in the letter from yesterday that basically said, as your family needs to kind of talk it through and find out what's the right thing for you. I think that's an important thing. I hope the students and their families are able to do that to the best of their abilities. As I have 2 high school students myself who have good grades, but they're also teenage boys. And so they were asking me, why the heck would I bother if I'm already passing? Why don't I just do nothing and keep on passing, right? And it took the conversation to, tell them why it's important for them to actually do it, and that they're actually going to get something out of it. So I think that piece to it's very important. I'm not sure how I appreciate the flexibility that's the way it's put together, that everybody is kind of set up for success this way, which I really appreciate. If saying, if you're passing before, failing before, what did we have, about 2 weeks of the third trimester before we stopped, right? That's not a whole lot of time to kind of set a baseline grade there. So I'm not sure exactly how I feel about that as a parent, but as the board member, I do appreciate that flexibility that's out there to trying to meet all the needs for our students. So those are just comments I had. I didn't really have any questions.
Thanks, Sean.
Matt, one of the things that struck me as I was reading through the correspondence is that I, as a parent, would have had a heck of a time trying to figure this out when our kids were in high school, if this had happened then. And I assume that there are a number of families and parents that are also going to be very puzzled and confused about what how their students can complete the survey, what their choices should be. I am looking for assurance that the teaching staff, the student family advocates, the other building staff are going to be doing everything that they can to assist parents and students in making these decisions, which, as I understand it, these are novel decisions that students in this district are being called upon to make now in this situation.
Yeah, that's definitely been a big part of our work, Charlie, and I think it's a great question that, not everybody also has that opportunity to have the conversation at home that I can have, with some folks, regarding their family situation. And so that conversation is going to look a little bit differently, and their ability to access some of the information is going to look a little different. And so what we've really tried to do is have a nimble strategy here where we can get data back to buildings, and we can employ the help of our support professionals to say, who have we not heard back from, who's failing and hasn't responded to us, or who would be in that withdraw situation and hasn't responded to us, and how do we reach out to them. And so part of this is having that district plan and that approach, and then how do we enlist the help of the buildings and the teaching staff, the support staff, the guidance counselors, the family and student advocates, to be making those continual contacts with people to know where they stand. If we haven't heard from that student, or they're not participating, are they in the loop on what the communication has been? And so I would say from our, again, our principal meeting we had this afternoon at 2, we talked extensively about that and talked about what that plan would look like and how each building was going to approach that. I know buildings have plans for webinars with their parents to help them wade through that information. I think West High's is tonight.
Yes, it is.
And I think we have the other buildings slated to go this week, where they'll have an opportunity, but we know even though some of those standardized opportunities won't reach everybody, and it's going to take individual follow-ups and individual contacts. And so I think it's something we're very in tune to and very appreciative of, knowing that that's a ton of information. It's a ton for people to consume, and we're going to have to do a lot of support through the process.
Charlie, this is Brady. If I could, echo those sentiments. I know that, the teachers have a weekly post that they do on a schedule at the secondary level, and the folks that I've worked with in the curriculum coordinator group and just other teacher teams that I'm on across the district, this has been the dominant topic of conversation, as you can imagine, is how do we communicate with students, have conversations with them about the options, be really clear about, to the best of our ability as we build this for the next 4 or 5 weeks, what it is that we're going to be expecting. People are really approaching this with a lot of grace and empathy and compassion and inclusion. And then I hope that, I've heard from teachers that they're getting a lot of emails from students asking them questions. And so I think that the teachers definitely are engaged, in that, and doing just continual outreach to students who we haven't heard as much from as we want. And so I think there's a good partnership going with it.
Good, thanks very much.
Quick question, now that high school is required, how does that play out for our students on IEPs and other special need education students? What type of support is being given to those families to ensure that they can meet that required learning environment?
Sure, and I'll let Lisa jump in here and talk some more about this. But, one thing I said about her earlier today that I think is important to just even recognize here this evening is, as we've had this conversation about what's best for all of our students and families in the district, and as we've looked at voluntary or if it's required and what that approach is going to be, yes, there's been some questions we've had around special education and how we continue to serve all kids and entitled students and ELL students. I just think Lisa's been great about it never being that we can't do it for special education students. That's never been the talk, right? Is that we can't get something done. and we can't create the access for special ed kids. We want to be deliberate and we want to be planful, and we want to make sure that whatever we've provided everybody, we can do for all those folks. But I think that's really been a great part of this work, is it's never been, we can't do this because, or we can't take this option because. So I would just say that from the outset, that while we want to make sure we've really done a good job to account for all of those things and try to plan for how we're going to approach holding additional meetings and approaching additional access, we've really tried to have a solution-focused orientation, and that's a big credit to Lisa and her group's work. So Lisa, do you want to jump in here about some of the special education components of the transition?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So in the communication, you'll see just a couple of references that students with IEPs will be contacted by their case coordinators to further discuss the implications of each of these options. So we have, if we can build flexibility in for anyone, it should be the IEP, the group of IEP students, because we have the full force of flexibility behind that group of students more than anyone else. So, we kind of, the sky's the limit as far as flexibility. So I think teachers actually have more room to innovate. And as soon as we can help teachers understand that, I think they'll actually maybe have kind of a good time designing supports that where the sky's the limit, and thinking of really new and innovative ways to get content and services to students. And what we really hope is that some of those ideas will transfer back, when students are back in front of us. And, we're just going to be doing the best that we can. And I keep telling people, that's all anyone is able to do at this point. We didn't choose this. We wouldn't choose this. We want all of our students here, right here with us. But that's not an option right now, but that doesn't mean that we have to be disconnected from them. So our goal is to maintain that connection, to help them feel connected, to help their families feel connected, to let them know they're not alone, and we are here to help them. And this is a good example of that, by making those contacts and saying, well, here's a good explanation of these options, and for you, this is what this would mean. Here's how this would play out kind of in your specific coursework. So, if I were you, maybe you and your family could talk about this scenario, maybe give some recommendations, offer to have even just a team meeting, a conference, but eventually an IEP meeting of some sort will probably need to be held, but it doesn't need to be a full IEP team in every case. For some students, it really maybe the IEP might not need to be changed much at all. And in some cases, there might need to be a lot of change to the IEP. So, we're just starting with students that we know for sure will need a lot of change to the IEP. And we're going to try to have those meetings first, and then, kind of go from there. But making contact with a caseload to get these course choices kind of settled out first is the first step, because that's the first step for everyone. So does that answer your question for right now, Charlie? I think Charlie.
Sure, I'm sorry. Actually, it was Ruthina, I think, actually.
Oh,
It was Ruthina. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
right.
it does.
Thank you.
And it does.
Lisa.
Yeah. So thank you, Lisa and Matt, for your what you've said. And I actually am very appreciative and grateful for your work. And Brady and everyone else too. So I may ask questions. I'm not being critical.
And I'll just offer one
Thanks.
more note on this because there were some questions on that. So we've been meeting regularly with the team at the AEA, and they have assured us two things. The first is that they'll meet all the requirements of IEPs for students who are in our required learning program at the high school level, but then they've also been fairly vocal in their willingness to go above and beyond what you would consider to be the minimum for students that are in our voluntary thing for us, but they've certainly try to meet available to them to the AEA.
Steve, you're cutting out there a little bit, but I think you were just talking about the AEA support to try to help us facilitate this.
Yeah, I was.
these
Sorry, let's
meetings
some
through
power here.
So I think one data point Krista just shared with me, we've had 1,100 students complete the survey so far, and that's in 3 hours. So that is great news for us, just seeing that here today, because you know, we worried about anytime you put out survey, but survey response during this time has been really high, you know, traditionally high in anything we've asked about. So we're glad to see that, and we want to get those results, like I had talked about earlier, to the buildings as quickly as we can, so we can turn it over to those building level teams to support the kids and continue them in the learning process. So other questions you might have had for the secondary portion of this before I turn it over to Amy?
I have a question, but before I get to my question, I want to thank Matt, you, and the rest of the team for how this was rolled out to the teachers. I was working in the dining room last week and heard your voice.
Oh no, so you got to hear me forever. Oh no.
So I did wander over to watch the rollout teacher.
There you go. So you know exactly what I said then. There you go. Yep.
And I want to say thank you. It was a really well-run meeting. I appreciated how the questions ran. I thought the information was pushed out really nicely. So kudos to you on that. My question is, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a student can choose to continue with the class 4 grade up until pretty much the last day and then switch to a pass if they've experienced issues with the online learning or obstacles along the way that aren't expected. Is that correct? And if so, are we messaging that to the students? Because I think it's important to say you should at least give this a try. And if it's not working out, you will have the option to revert back to a pass.
Yeah, we're trying, you know, and we'll continue to try to urge that message. That's why we also wanted the principals to do those webinars with their families to still try to dig into some of those options some more, because, you know, there's only so much of that we can communicate in writing in the process, but there's some personal touch that also needs to be provided to that, as far as, you know, what kind of ability you have to engage in that class right now, and how, if you try to continue on in it, even if you don't achieve the grade you like, you still have, you know, potentially this fallback option of still passing it, but you'll be in receipt of the learning. And, you know, I think the cool thing about this on just an education scale, if there's a silver lining in it, it's made us think about grades a lot, right? And what a grade means and what it represents, and how we've traditionally assigned grades. And so I think that'll generate a lot of good conversation for our education system moving forward. But yeah, at least I would say that'll be one we can just continue to have to try to explain and drive home to kids, and hope to do yet this week. Other questions? All right, Amy, you want to go ahead and jump in with your part?
Looks like it's my turn. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to share a bit of new news with you at the elementary level. As was stated before, we are staying with the voluntary educational enrichment opportunities at grades K-8, but I'll share a little bit more about K-6. And if you've been following, we shared some communication last week with parents, about Wednesday of last week, and teaching staff the day before, and then again this week, last night with teaching staff, and then just a little bit ago with parents. Like Steve already talked about, just a huge shout out and a thank you to the team. There's a ton of collaboration happening right now. We've got a great partnership, relying heavily on some teacher leaders, different administrators, and Brady, to really reimagine what learning can look like. Our staff is, you know, doing things we've never asked them before to do, and they are just stepping up to the plate and doing a wonderful job. So huge shout out to all of them, and as well as our parents. Our parents are being asked to do things that they've never done before, and again, completely voluntary on their part. But we see people hungry for that. You know, it's been a little bit of tricky to try to balance all the needs and the desires out there, because of course some people want us to be doing more. some really feel like we've struck the right balance, and then others might be feeling overwhelmed. And, you know, I keep trying to remind myself that what if we were just being asked to do this and we weren't living through a pandemic? It would be a heavy lift. But we also have to be super considerate of the fact that we also have a pandemic, and we do not know what that's presenting for our families out there, how that's presenting for their individual needs, as well as our staff. And so we're trying to keep all of that in mind and balance everything, as well as considering and always keeping at the forefront equity. So we continue to work our 4 goal areas, which is always at these last several weeks been asking our staff to connect with our families on the social emotional level, reach out to them and encourage them, or offer support to have them log into Clever, and then really encourage Dreambox and Lexia use. Those have been our 4 goals. For some of our teaching staff, they are having to learn Dreambox and Lexia right along with our parents, hopefully one step ahead of them. And last week we really tried to, with those who weren't as familiar, share some routines that they could go through, that they could check on, whether it was usage or understand where the parent resources were within the product. So as parents were reaching back to them and vice versa, that they were feeling confident where they could give some parents some tips about, you know, instruction if kiddos were getting stopped or halted anywhere in the products, as well as at that time, they could also offer their own ideas for instructional strategies. This week we talked to the teaching staff, and we utilize our instructional design strategist, elementary principal, and teacher librarian group to help communicate our messages back to the 21 different buildings. We've been meeting on Monday afternoons to set and communicate direction for the district. One addition this week, and several of our teachers have been using Zoom already, but we've asked everybody to do that, but we've talked a little bit about a soft rollout this week and encouraged lots of different avenues or ways that could be done. So for those people that are maybe uncomfortable, never used technology before, our teacher librarians are great in offering to set up and host that Zoom for them as they are becoming more familiar with it. Again, completely voluntary on behalf of our families. And then we foreshadowed both with our teaching staff and with the parents that work has been underway. We've considered a variety of things around packets or workbooks, and ultimately we've settled on, and with the governor's announcement on Friday, the last 2 days, we've been putting our orders in for a reading workbook opportunity and a math workbook opportunity for kids. These products will complement our current curriculum that we have in the district, and they're all based on grade level standards. The math lines pretty tightly. It's an Envisions product, but not the one that we currently have out in the buildings. So for our kids that have received, of course, the previous instructional year, the graphics, the instruction around the different topics and the units that they're in, that's going to look pretty familiar. It's not the curriculum that we currently use. We had a lot of debate on whether we should release, the journals that we have right now in the buildings. But what I love about what we ultimately settled on is with these 2 products, there is going to be a plethora of information that our parents can pick from. So it's something that they could certainly have their kids working out of, from now until school starts again in August, hopefully. We will roll out some more information to staff next week around, what we think needs to happen next for distribution, watching how soon we can get this, hoping, given what's happening across the shipping industry, we hope this can be expedited, but we'll just continue to watch that. So we need to think about distribution, and then also we're considering that within the daily schedule that we've already built out, that of course you've seen, and we really strongly recommend up at the reading time period and the math time period are 2 online products, but that we could make some note of some areas that we would like to target then within those workbooks, so that then that would allow our teaching staff to reach back out to parents, not only if they had questions around Lexia and Dreambox, but also anything that they've worked on at those pages. If we just leave it completely wide open, then there's a lot potentially that our staff have to respond to. So those are things in the works. I'm hoping that you've seen the communication that's gone out. We're ecstatic to see what's happened with Lexia and Dreambox even over the course of the last week. And so you can see those statistics. Dreambox usage is jumped up from 41% in March to 59% this past week, and then Lexia up from 26% to 51%. So with that, I'll take questions if there's questions.
Diane, I have a question that you might be able to cover, and it's actually not a question I need answered, but maybe more for the public to hear if they're listening to this. Can you just talk about the benefits that we've seen from Lexia and Dreambox from the teachers that are using it before all this happened with the students in the classroom? To my knowledge, it's been a very positive thing to help students as they learn to read and things of that nature. So if you could just comment on that. And then, but before you do that, I just want to make an overall comment on this whole thing, is that I really think that the district is doing a great job in working towards a solution for this. Nothing's ever going to be able to compare to that one-on-one learning in the classroom with the teachers. But I think the teachers have taken this on well, and not every teacher is comfortable teaching from behind a computer screen. So everybody's experience is going to be a little bit different across the households, and that's okay, because I know the teachers are doing the best that they can with what they have available to them. So with that, I just want to go back to Diane. Maybe you could touch on that Lexia and Dreambox piece just a little bit for the public.
Sure. Yeah, so we've seen some great growth in our students who are using Lexia and Dreambox. The programs themselves allow us to go in and to monitor how many minutes the students are spending on the programs, and then how many lessons they're completing during that time and what growth they're making. So as you would expect, the more minutes they're spending on the programs, the greater growth they're making. So throughout the school year, you know, the amount of time they've been able to access the program has varied a little bit. And also, we didn't have licenses for all students. We just couldn't afford those throughout the program. But both Dreambox and Lexia really stepped up during this COVID situation, and they gave us free licenses for everyone in the district who didn't already have a license. So we were able to give that to everybody. And now we have, you know, that's caused us now to have teachers who maybe hadn't used it in certain grades prior to this to be learning the format, and kids who are brand new to it to be jumping in. So we have a little bit of a learning curve, but we have noticed not only are we getting, you know, higher and higher percentages of kids who are on the program because now it's free and they all have access, but the usage rates are higher too. So we're seeing that the kids who are on it are also using it at, you know, at the number of minutes and beyond what the programs are really asking them to. So we're seeing great usage and then great growth in the students who are using the programs too. The other thing, if I can just say, is we're hoping then to be able to secure the funds to be able to have Dreambox and Lexia for all kids for next year. I mean, that would be a goal of ours, so that all this learning that we're doing on the back end here, we get more use out of that than just these, you know, next 5 weeks of, you know, when we're in closure. The program we know will last at least through the end of June. If we can get the funding, we'll extend it all throughout next year. So students who've been able to learn how to use the program and teachers who've been able to learn how to support it can now use that knowledge to continue to help kids, because we know when the kids return to school in the fall, there will probably be some gaps in their learning, and we're going to have to do some catch up with some of the kids. So we're going to have those as a resource to be able to offer kids throughout the year. Sorry if that took a little longer than what you were asking for, Paul.
Other questions for Amy or Diane on elementary learning?
I just have a couple of comments. I already briefly said this to Amy, but I kind of wanted the whole board to hear it personally as a parent of an elementary school kid. I've found that this rollout has been really great. It took, there was a curve to figure out Dreambox and Lexia, but we pushed through and we figured it out. And the support that we've been getting from our own first grade teacher has been great. And so I really want to commend you all on that. I know that we've received a lot of emails. The second thing I want to say is we've kind of been receiving an uptick in emails about secondary education this past week. And so I did a quick kind of survey between some parent friends of mine, about 10 moms spread out between 5 schools in the district, both from working parents, but dual working parent families. And they said basically the same thing. It was actually really interesting to hear their feedback. They thought that the district was doing a great job. A lot of them felt this sense of overwhelm just in general. And so I want to raise that because if these parents are feeling overwhelmed, I think a lot of our low SES kids and those families are also feeling overwhelmed. And so I don't think we should underestimate the amount of parents who are struggling through this time. But Amy, they also said things like, gosh, maybe if I could have a workbook or maybe just like one more Zoom meeting. And so I was thrilled to see the email that went out and the changes because I think you hit it right on the nail, Amy. I think a great job anticipating the little tweaks that needed to be done, and you did them. And so I think kudos to you and the team. Really good job.
Thank you, Lisa. There's so many people working behind the scenes that I just wish I could name every single one of them because I don't deserve the credit. There's a ton of people working on this, but thank you.
Yeah, Amy and Matt and Steve, Diane, everyone. These reports are great to hear. You know, as a board member, we have, you know, we really have, I have a responsibility to hear reports about everything that's occurring in the district. We know some kids, you know, their parents, the kids and their parents, probably not participating very well right now. So I think it's, you know, we have the, we have an obligation to hear that information too. So I hope, and I know that you may not have that information with much your comfort in its accuracy at this point, because we're just beginning now to have kids do all these remote things. So I think over the next couple of 3 weeks, please go ahead and tell us that. You know, if you think, you know, we're not making this work very well for these groups of kids, go ahead and tell us that. You know, we just need to hear that. Thanks.
And Charlie, just as an FYI, I'm foreshadowing a little bit, but when we get further down in the agenda, we're going to talk about the return to learn plan that the state's preparing for us. Standing the learning, get back issues that you're right now.
Okay, thanks a lot, Steve.
Amy, can you tell us if students will have access beyond the school year into the summer to some of these programs?
That's something that we're working on right now, and Diane kind of alluded to it. So we've been asking questions of Les about our understanding thus far around CARES and the stimulus package, and that what that means for the district, and you know, what can we pick up out of that funding with some of the things that we're doing. Like Diane shared with you, we were ready to pull the trigger and put some dollars behind Dreambox and Lexia, and of course we paid for licenses for a lot of kids already, but they came through and allowed it to be free for the remainder of the year for all of the kids. You know, Diane and I recognized early on that we cannot be in this position where we've had such a push and we get our families using it and our staff comfortable with it and then pull it away next year. We just know the price tag of that is quite high. While it probably could have been coded to COVID right now, you know, without knowing all the finance side, could it still be next year? I don't know, but this is a costly product, but I think one that we we need to think about ensuring for our families. If we knew we could fund it next year, I think it would be outstanding that we could continue to offer it, even though, you know, the school year for us changes over on July 1, that families just knew that they were going to have access all throughout the summer as well. So that would be ideal.
How many schools don't or didn't have it this past year that have it now?
I'm going to let Diane take that question.
So we were able to get some funding from the foundation, who were very generous, to be able to give us funding to reach 15% of our students in Dreambox and in Lexia. So all buildings had access to it. Some buildings decided, instead of doing 15% of their kids on Dreambox and 15 on Lexia, they might have said, we're just putting that all in Dreambox. So they might not have had access to the other program. Some buildings said, we're going to identify the kids in every grade level. So it was kind of sprinkled throughout. Some buildings said, we're going to focus this on maybe grade 2 and 3. So all kids at those grades had access to it. And some buildings were able to add some additional funding, maybe from Title I funds, to be able to afford a building-wide license. So there's not an easy answer to that. It was kind of pushed out, or we let buildings have the flexibility of using those funds in a way that they felt could best meet the needs of their kids.
The other thing I would just share about that, and Diane alluded to it earlier, is, you know, we've been sharing with you the percentage of kids that we can see logging on now, and that's super exciting for us. But each grade level, and depending on where the student is at, because it's that adaptive piece, it will tell the parent and the child about how many minutes is kind of perfect. And although most of our communication says 20 to 30 minutes, we know that there's an ideal minute range that a child is hitting each week. And so I would love to kind of start to monitor and watch that next. You know, it's one thing to get in there. It's a whole nother thing than to use the product very consistently. And so we've tried to push that message about continuity of instruction there. And it can never, ever, appreciate Paul's comment, it's never going to replace the teacher in the classroom in front of the students that can deliver both that whole group as well as that small group instruction and additional maybe interventions that they need. But right now it's something that we can and are trying to rely on.
Thanks, Amy. Diane, anything else on elementary teaching and learning? Really good discussion. Shall we move to technology? Adam?
Sounds good. I will keep this short tonight. Just some updates on numbers and a few other things. For device requests, we've received 2,768. We have fulfilled 2,726, about 98.5%. And that includes all requests through 10 a.m. this morning, except those with extenuating circumstances. To build a little bit on the previous conversation, students will keep computers into the summer. Though we will be arranging collection from graduating seniors, there are other things that will need to be collected from them beyond technology. So that's a little bit bigger conversation. But other students will keep their computers, so they'll continue to have access. On the internet side, we've deployed about 750 hotspots. We have 450 addresses set up for, or assigned, scheduled to receive MediaCom service. As I said last week, I have a little bit more insight this week. The providers had some supply chain issues, particularly sourcing modems. They've resolved those at this point. Installations are ongoing. They've been reporting to us some challenges with those, and we're trying to help facilitate follow-up contacts with families who MediaCom installers are having a difficult time reaching. Their installation rate's about 150 households per week at this point. So we will continue to work with MediaCom to try to facilitate that as best we can on our end. It's a little difficult, obviously, since we don't have access to their installers directly. But we'll do what we can there. And then we do continue to seek quick turnaround options for additional hotspots. That's a nationwide backlog, so we're not having a ton of success there, but we keep trying. Tech support, we continue to see between 150 and 250 tech support requests per day that our staff are handling. Increased use of our chat option, which we're really pushing. That one's really efficient for families because our typical response time is about 30 seconds. So we're able to get to people pretty quickly with that. And then just, again, building a little bit on the previous conversation, looking at the Canvas side, secondary logins today, about 42% of secondary students logged into Canvas. And then within the past week, it's about 68%. So we do see pretty substantial engagement there. And I didn't tease out those numbers for high school versus junior high, but looking through the list of logins, it's pretty heavily weighted at this point towards high school, which is not entirely surprising, especially with the recent information that came out about the high school required option. But any questions? I'm happy to address.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate the updates. Really good work. Long-term planning. I think that was going to be Steve.
Again, I know unstable internet connection is giving you some audio problems, so we'll see if I can. I'm going to try another link here too. But while I'm doing that, I'll just share that the DE is requiring that we develop a return to learn plan for the fall. They've also said that it's unlikely they're going to have much more information about that out to us in the next couple of weeks. As they said, it's not as time sensitive as some of the other work that we have in front of us. But one of the things that I think you'll want to keep an eye on here, and we'll certainly put it on an agenda for upcoming meetings, is as we get a little bit closer to the end of April, beginning of May, we think we'll get some more feedback from them and some more details about what the expectations are for that return to learn plan. Probably the one that's generating the most questions through both the DE webinars and the superintendent's meetings is this issue about start date for school. So I just wanted to share with you that the most recent update that we have indicates that there's no change in the number of school days or the number of hours. It's simply an allowance to begin your school year early. During the UEN meeting today, there were, JP, I can't remember if this was at the first or the second UEN meeting, but there were quite a bit of conversation about whether or not the school year should start early and whether or not there should be some breaks introduced throughout the year to continue to get the same number of hours, but perhaps start school a little earlier. So we don't have a lot of additional information about that right now in terms of what components will be required in that return to learn plan, but in the stay tuned area, presume that we're going to have quite a bit more information about that in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Thanks, Steve.
This is kind of the Debbie Downer question, but as you prepare your return to learn plan, are you guys also discussing the possibility of what if we don't start school again on time in August?
Yes. Oops. No, I'm muted. No, there we go. Yes, we are actually. The questions that are out there right now are about number one, what happens if we don't start school? Or number two, the other scenario that played out in the conversation today was, what if we start school and there's a resurgence and there's another break in-person education later in the fall? So I would say that those are the two primary areas of contingency planning right now. And we're working through multiple scenarios. But again, we're waiting for a little bit more information from the Department of Ed in terms of their expectations with, and once we get a little bit further down there, we'll start doing some more contingency planning and developing some scenarios for how would you respond to that.
There's some logistical pieces, you know, like Steve's talking about, I think that are important for us to consider, Paul, but then I'd say also just kind of on the PD end for teachers, or even the way we're handling some of our current continuous learning plans. I think we just want to recognize too that the way we've tried to scaffold that is that we'd also be able to take advantage of that opportunity, just like you guys talked about with the Dreambox and Lexia conversation. I mean, there's a lot of things we've done on course expectations for teachers too that we would, you know, be able to build on if that opportunity presented itself again in the fall. So that's definitely been a consideration how we've approached several facets of this. That this might not be the only scenario we end up in this case for, and we want to be able to, some of the things would change, but some of the work we put into some of these elements we would want to be able to obviously use again and have it be in a nimble format for us.
One thing we shared with the instructional coaches and principals and teacher librarians this week was around that very thing. And at the elementary level, we're not all using a learning management system, but there's one available to us. So some of our buildings and some of our teachers are used to using Seesaw, and that sits behind the Clever badge that our parents have access to, but it's not necessarily up and running and viable in a lot of cases. And right now we are working with some of our teacher leaders to put together a series of modules that people can go in and watch the various tasks or that little in-service or video that's put in front of them, have them play around in Seesaw and get comfortable with it. So our goal then would be teaching staff to have enough knowledge at the elementary level around Seesaw that if we had to pivot again next fall, whether that was August 24th, October 1st, February 2nd, that tool then could be used. It's one that can communicate with parents, with the children. We can post content there. We can post content for each of our subject areas, videos, and then students can turn work in. So much like Canvas at the secondary level, but that's what we're spending then the next several weeks is making sure that when our elementary teaching staff leaves for the summer, that they feel fairly well versed in that product.
So Janet and other board members too, as well as staff, it seems to me that one, not knowing what's going to happen in the fall is the biggest situation that we're probably facing right now. And I'm feeling as a board member a great lack of preparation to help the staff, students, and parents in the district go through whatever's going to happen in August and the months after that. So I wonder if we could talk some more, maybe, I'm not sure if this is the right time or not, about the board looking at some scenarios that might be applicable, that might come to pass in the fall. I mean, it's possible, that we could have buildings which don't seem to carry any particular risk for additional infections, and some buildings which have a great risk. So we may be looking at differences within the district about what we can expect in terms of the in-phase instruction and remote instruction, and what data or what local information would we have to help us in our decision making. We're going to be relying upon the state still entirely for all these decisions, or is the governor going to say local counties and school districts start making your own decisions about whether to open or not? I'm frank with you. I'm a bit apprehensive about being able to participate in a meaningful, informed, intelligent way in looking at our future here over the next several months.
Charlie, I'll jump in. Thank you for stating the feeling of sort of almost this is out of our control to some degree. There's a lot of unknowns that we say it at my work all the time. We're doing contingency planning for contingency planning for contingency planning, and it's sort of what I'm hearing the district team talk about in terms of thinking about next year. Worst case, there's no school. Another case, school starts and we have to close again. You're raising another scenario that maybe we've got some local control and we can be more focused at the building level, even in terms of what we're trying to do. And so I wonder if we can, get more insights from our legislative team members who are in contact with the governor's office and DOE, and they're also in the same situation. They don't know what's going to happen, but as we get closer to the end of the school year, we do need to begin putting some of these scenario-based contingency plans in place so that as a board, we have awareness, so that the administrative team and staff obviously have started this work, but how best can we support? What kinds of data do we need to make decisions? I think you raised really, really good questions. It's hard for me to answer because there's just so many incredible unknowns. I think maybe one thing we can do, this is for the admin team, is maybe we do want to spend some time in an upcoming board meeting thinking through what are the various scenarios that we currently are planning for, so we at least have a little bit more discussion on those. And then it may be that the board, we want to have and we do need to, have a board retreat at some point and talk about what our goals are for next year, and evaluate our work on our goals this year. And it may be there's some things in that planning work that we can do in a board retreat to kind of prepare ourselves for how we need to be responsive in the data that we're going to be looking for so that we're actively participating in this scenario-based contingency planning work as well. So I mean, again, I think those are just some initial thoughts, just literally off the top of my head, but I think you raised some really good questions. We just don't know, and we need to be as prepared as we possibly can. And that means thinking just in wild scenarios, because those wild scenarios might actually come to pass. So I don't know, others of you have comments on that? Steve, Matt, Amy, Chase, others, other board members around how we can get our arms around sort of how do we prepare for the unknown where we are today.
If one thing I might just add for, I'm getting an echo. From a context standpoint, I think as we get some more structure from the DE, I think that will help us kind of frame this conversation and figure out what's next.
And it may be we can ask, you know, some of our legislators to ask specific questions. I mean, it may be we could, you know, Zach's been super helpful, for example, you know, going and asking questions and sort of saying, hey, you know, districts need this information so that they can plan effectively what's your stance going to be. And so we can start advocating to the DE so they get prepared to provide the kind of guidance that we're going to need to be able to run the district. So I think I interrupted Matt. Sorry about that.
No, I mean, I was going to agree with Steve. I think once we know some of that information that's talked about in that return to learn plan, that can guide some of those conversations. And then I think it's, you know, to what some of the points Charlie was bringing up, or what are the data sources we want to use to drive some of those conversations, right? I mean, we'll still want to talk to local health officials like we were doing early in this situation, and some information that's closest to us is the best, and trying to account for all those things. I mean, there are still some critical things we need to spend time on, you know, before the end of the school year too. And so those August pieces are important, but this is a huge undertaking, right? And so we need to think about how we scaffold and step into each of those pieces, I think is important too, before we get ahead of ourselves and start worrying about August. We also have some things we still need to spend some time and energy on to make sure that feel good before the end of the school year, and how our kids transition into summer and what some of the summer pieces are going to look like for families. And so August is important and definitely on our radar, but we also have to make sure we're spending the time on that here and now piece. And I don't think any of you are saying not to do that, but I just think it's important about where we choose to spend the limited amount of time we have together on when we spend that time. So just a couple other things to think about.
Yeah, and I want to say, Matt, that I don't want any of you to do less of what you're doing now at all. I think that would just not be a wise thing to do at this point in time.
The thing I was going to add is just in today's DE webinar, they talked about that in the next couple of weeks, we were going to receive the guidance around the plan that's due on July 1, but they actually wouldn't have the specifics outlined in the CASA system for a while. And that task force that was initially created is the group that's been working on it and will continue to work on it. So as you can imagine, everything, you know, the plane's being built as we're flying it. And, you know, that's also what we're trying to respond to. But Matt and I were having a little bit of a conversation earlier today, and it's, you know, there's so much work that continues to face us every day. And here's just an example as we continue to think through. There's so many systems that we just naturally operate from that are tick along really well, but it confronts you constantly. And just the idea even around enrollment and registration. Can that look similar this year? What does summer look like for us with the pandemic? How could we reimagine that? I mean, it's just almost every system we've built at some time is surfacing as a potential issue for us to have to work through. And then there's just the normal work of the organization that occurs at this time of year. And that's, you know, trying to balance what we need to get done versus everything, you know, keeps popping up in front of us as well. So appreciate that. And we're definitely need to be forward thinking. And those are reasons why we're trying to still harness the opportunity and time that we do have with our staff, but full well knowing that we also are requiring them and asking them to reach out to our parents and our students and to be teaching as well. So again, even just, I talked earlier about striking the balance with our parents. It's trying to also strike a good balance with our staff.
All really, really good points. And one thing I have confidence in is whatever guidance we get from the DE, whatever happens in terms of the pandemic and closures or openings, my confidence is in this team to address the matter in a caring, a good way, focused on students, families, teachers, staff, and that we respond as well as we possibly can. You've done that so far. And I have, as I said, high degree of confidence that you'll continue to just do outstanding work with whatever comes our way. And so, and what we've learned and what we've adjusted to and made plans for already, that's just all good foundation for what is possibly going to come next. So, and I do agree with you, you have to focus on the priority of the day. But at some point, you know, carving out once more information comes and a little bit more clarity, carving out some time for that future thinking, it'll happen. We'll get there when we've got the capacity to do it. Okay, let's move into Chase's operations update, starting with facilities.
Sure. So good evening. Nice to see everybody again. One of the hazards of us working like this is I often can't talk to my colleagues as quick as I need to. So I'm going to share some information tonight that is unfortunate but not unexpected, but it's going to be news to even my admin colleagues. We actually just this afternoon in the last 30 minutes had our first reported confirmed case of COVID-19 at one of our buildings. We had one of the members of our construction teams self-report here at West High. Actually, we ran through a scenario earlier this week in preparation for this. And so we have our protocols up and running. And the main protocol is that we will close West High completely for 72 hours. Follow the CDC guidelines regarding cleaning and sanitation, and then provide notification of a general measure to individuals that were in the building. Again, following the CDC guidance that we do not provide specific details about the individual. However, while it is developing right now, I felt that we wanted to be transparent up front with the board and with the community. And since we have you here, while again, it's unfortunate, but not unexpected, knowing that there is community spread in our organization, that we have had our first reported case of someone in one of our buildings. But we do have protocols and precautions in place, and so we will activate those as early as this evening. Dwayne was on here, but he hopped off because he's spearheading that for us. So I don't have a lot of detail for you, but do want to reassure the board and the community that we are prepared for this, and so we're going to take those steps to address that. We do know that West High is one of our food service sites, so ensuring that we continue to deliver meals is of a top priority for us. Allison and I have been texting and already working on a plan for us to pick another temporary location on the west side, and we'll start to communicate that out as soon as possible, so families do have access to meals over the next 3 days while they're not served at West High, and we can continue to provide that opportunity for everyone in our community. So I'm sure there's some questions around that. I will try to provide whatever information I can, but I think the important piece right now is that if you start to hear that yes, West High will be closed, even though all our buildings are technically closed for the next 3 days, so that we can perform sanitation and cleaning of that facility. I have some other updates that we were planning on giving, but I will pause there in case there's any questions or comment from board members on that piece.
Chase, could you just briefly say what measures will be taken to protect the people that are going to be doing the cleaning in the building?
Sure, Charlie. And we've already actually have some of those precautions in place for our custodial staff and our staff that are in the buildings. They will have gloves, face masks and shields. And so we've tried to make sure that they have their own personal protection equipment when we put them in those situations. Dave McKenzie leads our custodial staff side and has done a very good job of making sure that we have the supplies we need to ensure that we mitigate the potential exposure as much as possible to our employees. Again, it's really just developing, and so I can give the board more of an update in terms of details of exactly where we did and in terms of that as we go through it. But that's a good question, Charlie, and we have tried to think through that and make sure that we have some of those protections for our staff.
Other questions? Thanks for sharing that breaking news, Chase. Sorry.
Yeah, right. I don't like to do that because I like to at least let everybody know that, but I think it's important as things progress that we don't walk away from this meeting and then board members are having to get calls and say, hey, West High all of a sudden got shut down. So go ahead. Oh, okay, so we'll keep you updated on that. But a couple other things. That was going to be the piece that I ended with, that we put some protocols in place in case we had that happen. But we will start there and say that we have developed obviously a plan and we've had to activate it this evening in case there was a confirmed case of COVID. However, we do continue to have our building shut down. With the announcements that school will be online for the rest of the year, one of the things that we started to hear both from families and from our staff is access to the buildings. We're beginning to work on a phased plan to grant that access. The first phase is really making sure that we continue to meet those critical and crucial needs of the school district, with the priority being student learning. So working with Lisa Glenn and our special education teachers so that we have materials from inside the school to those teachers. They can make sure there's continuous learning going on for our special ed education students. We also have some pieces like that revolving other programs. Students that are, for example, in AP art that need art projects for their AP portfolios to continue that work towards obtaining credit. And so we put some processes in place for those one-off situations where we know that there are critical things inside a building that a staff member or a student needs. We've set up a health safety check protocol that everyone has to go through when they want to enter a building, a quick questionnaire and also a temperature check that our lead nurse is, as well as Laura Daly, have been very instrumental in making sure that we have the materials for those at all of our sites. The second phase of that is really looking at what we need to do to remove materials, both personal and professional, from certain parts of the building for construction purposes. As the board, fully is engaged in our facilities master plan, we have several projects that are ongoing. So the facilities team is working with our building administrators and making some of those areas a priority for us. Whether it's getting teachers in to help clean out the rooms, or whether our administrative staff working with our custodial staff to clean out student lockers to make sure that we get those items back to students. Now, we're not saying that they will be immediately back to students, but making sure that we start to move items out of areas that will be in construction for safety purposes, and also so construction can continue. However, we also know that there are things of a professional and personal nature that people will need before summer break. And as we move through the next few weeks, as we talk about planning over the long term, really following the lead of the state and our local health officials as we look at conditions becoming safer for having more people in confined areas while still practicing appropriate social distancing as some of the triggers for us allowing more access into our buildings. And we don't have those details all worked out, but we did want to share that we are kind of planning it. Critical student educational needs, looking at important and crucial construction needs, and then looking at a phase where we'll have more general access, obviously with certain precautions in place for individuals to remove things from the building before we would go on what has traditionally been our summer break. The other piece of access right now, you may have seen that the city put out new summer guidelines. We are going to go parallel with the city on those, just like we did when the city announced that they were closing playgrounds several weeks ago. No organized sports or activities on any of their athletic fields, and so we are going to take that same approach. Our tracks, our tennis courts, places where people can exercise and practice wellness, but in an appropriately social distance way, will remain available to the public. However, we are going to do what we think is appropriate to minimize the gathering of groups on any of those fields or surfaces that we have available in the school district. And so that's a quick update on our access piece for facilities. And before I turn it over to Allison to start for nutrition and meal service, I pause for any questions the board may
Just have
Yes, I
one
do.
quick question. Oh, sorry, Paul. Really quick. Basketball courts. So are those permissible for people to be on if they're practicing? Like if one kid is out there just getting exercise, shooting the ball around. I mean, how does that work? Is that off limits or what?
The majority of our basketball courts are inside our gyms, and so our gyms would be closed, and we wouldn't allow access even for one individual to come in and do a shoot around. But I know you're talking about outside, Ruthie.
Yeah, we have some like at our elementary schools.
Right, right. You know, technically our play structures and our playgrounds are closed, and so would we prefer people not to be on there? Absolutely, because one person shooting hoops can quickly turn into a pickup game where even 4 people are in close contact and not practicing appropriate social distancing. At the same time, we've told our administrators and our physical plant that while we will post signs, and this is our public message, that we're really going to lean on our partners in the city and local law enforcement about breaking up those types of gatherings. We don't expect our administrators to walk the perimeters. And so our message would be, you should not do that, but we're also not going to stand at the edge of those courts and chase people.
Can you clarify, and this may be a Dwayne or a Matt question as well, the only sports so far that haven't been canceled yet are softball and baseball, and should those go forward this summer? Can you clarify the situation at Mercer Park with the field that City High plays on for baseball? Because, and the reason I asked is because yesterday the city of Iowa City closed all of their fields through August 15th. And so how does that work with the agreement with City High if there is a season that should happen?
So that's a good question, Paul, and we've talked a little bit about that. We've entered into an agreement with the city for that field for use and upkeep. And without quoting the language, basically the agreement is that we would treat that field as one of our own fields. And so we would be responsible for the upkeep, which also means that we would have basically authority over utilization. And so while we would want to make sure that we were still in concert with the city on it, and our take on that is if the softball and baseball seasons were to take place, that we would be able to use that field given the parameters of the 28E agreement that we have with Iowa City on that field right now. And to that point, we continue, Jeff and Ben and our grounds crew are doing a tremendous job. We want to continue to make sure that we keep those surfaces in a playable condition so that if we do have a baseball and softball season, that we're able to use those and we're ready to go when the State High School Association would tell us that it's time to play ball. But that's a good question, but we think that we are in good shape in being able to use that field if we get to play sports this summer.
And the crews have already started maintaining them, so we'll be in good shape.
And it's just the one field then, right? I mean, sometimes I know they play games on the second baseball diamond, but it would just be the one field that they could use.
There's only one field that we maintain.
Yeah, but I think it's a great question just because that's where we do have some conflict right now with what's been done locally with the extension and, maybe the guidance we're getting from the high school athletic associations or the girls union at this point about what they potentially might be targeting or what they're looking at, like you said, with the no announcement to that effect with those summer programs and then knowing locally what's been said. Obviously, there's a conflict right there that we'll have to continue to look at and address. But like those guys said, we'll continue to maintain them, and when there's a decision to play, we'll have the opportunity to do that.
I have a question. What are the construction folks, the subcontractors, what are they doing to make sure their folks are safe?
So we've asked them to implement the same procedures that we're utilizing when people come to the buildings, JP, in terms of using a screener, and they shouldn't come if they feel sick. The CDC and the state recommend a certain quarantine period if people have been in contact with individuals that have either tested positive or presumed positive for COVID-19. And so I'll let Dwayne maybe detail this a little bit more, but our message to the contractor has been, you need to ensure that your subs are taking the same precautions that the school district is taking for its own employees when they come to our sites. Dwayne, anything you want to add?
I would only add that I've asked the contractors, and they have all provided assurances that they're following the COVID guidelines and from the CDC, and that they're ensuring that safety with their subcontractors. I also told them that I'd probably be sending out a memo yet this week with more explicit directions on how we're going to shut our buildings down. There has been no pushback. The contractors are all on board. They understand that if they need to shut down, they do it. It's voluntary. It's been a good conversation. So I think they're all following the rules. They're all concerned about their own employees as well, and there won't be any pushback.
And do all of our folks have the proper PPE?
In terms of our crafts and custodians, the custodians have access to all that material and PPE equipment. The crafts haven't been out in the buildings that much. They're going to start, but they will have the same equipment.
And we've made masks and gloves available to all of our nutrition service folks and our administrators that are on sites serving lunch every day as well.
We have an inventory of 22,000 gloves right now. We don't have that many masks, but we're adequately supplied with gloves. And masks are on order.
Okay, thanks for that.
So I'll just comment another comment on the end of JP's question and transition over to Allison. Is we've been following those guidelines for the last week or so, and as the CDC and state agencies have come out with different guidelines for restaurants and other organizations that are preparing food, even though technically our meal service doesn't fall within those guidelines, we've actually started following those as well. We think that that's good for those restaurants. It's good for what we're doing in our own kitchens. So Allison's done a nice job of ensuring that we're taking the utmost care when we're preparing food for our students, as well as making sure that we are protecting the health and well-being of our own staff. And we've been successful so far, both for our staff and for our families. And so Allison, why don't you tell us a little bit about how meal service is going this week?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Last week, we did slightly under 23,000 meals. The numbers continue to tick up every day. And for the first 2 days this week, we've averaged right around 5,000 meals. So I think we'll continue with that trend, and in the week higher as well. We are, as of this week, serving at 16 sites. We added Holiday Lodge this week, and that one has been doing around 75 meals a day. So of those 16 sites, we deliver to 12 of those sites. The 4 production kitchens, obviously where we produce there, we also serve. So that will change, of course, with West. But we'll continue to find a site to serve on that West side, and most likely produce those meals out of Liberty High starting tomorrow. We're at a point when the governor canceled for the rest of the year. We decided it was probably time to look at our menu. So our menu has been cold grab and go items, and starting next week, we're going to start incorporating some heat and eat items. And then for the most of May, we will have those menu items added as well. So there's a couple of advantages. I think families will welcome some changes to the menu. And also, I think it is a better move for us financially. We can not only use up some of the items that we have on hand, but it will allow us to use some of our commodity items which is financially advantageous to us as well. So it'll be things like we'll make the hamburgers will be individually packaged so they can take them home and heat and eat. All the meat items are fully cooked, by the way. They just need to be reheated. So chicken strips, chicken sandwiches, kid-friendly items, just like we have on our regular menu. So I think that'll be a nice addition. Tomorrow is Earth Day, and we do have a local yogurt planned for the menu. I don't know how many people are remembering it'll be Earth Day tomorrow, but I do think that's kind of a nice thing that we're able to do. So we'll have local yogurt on the menu tomorrow. I guess the only other thing I would just say is on a positive note, at the end of the year, we always work with seniors. Typically, they have time to use up their balances, and we see them buy a lot of cookies and those kind of things at the end of the year because they're trying to use up their account money. And so we find ourselves at a point now where a lot of families weren't planning on this, and so they have positive balances. And so we are starting that process of reaching out to seniors and that have a positive balance and working with them to make a plan. And so we have about 850 seniors with money still in their account. And so we have sent out some emails. We've heard back from about 200 people already. And of those, 95 have chosen to donate their balance, which is over $2,000. So I think that's a lovely sentiment given the situation. So I thought that was neat. That's all I have, unless you guys have questions.
One quick question, Allison. I think if I recall, you said West High was one of the most popular spots. If it still is it still?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have certainly seen that go up. We did like 375 yesterday. We were at the very last 10 minutes. I bet we served 50 meals. And so we were producing meals as fast as we could serve them out. Actually, North Central has been doing around 600 meals a day. And that's 600 bags. So that's 1,200 meals. So I think, again, because it's one of the few northern sites, it's been a popular one and well received in the community. I think, and I haven't even had a chance to talk to Chase about all this, but we are fast approaching our limit at North Central in terms of storage. So we're only able to get one delivery a week from our prime vendor. And when you do 600 to 700 meals, when you have to order for 5 days, that's like 22 cases of juice. And so we're running out of storage room there at North Central. So I think we're going to probably have to move our production to Liberty, and then we will transport the meals to North Central to serve. So the serving sites will stay the same, but our production sites we're going to change here. Well, tomorrow for sure for West High, and then probably North Central will move next week, and Northwest might as well. I'm working with Dwayne on that from some construction standpoint. So they wanted to get in a little early and work on that servery. So it seems like a great opportunity to make that happen.
And I guess the reason I asked about West is I'm just wondering, is the plan to like move to somewhere else like Horn, or is it like location? So like you're trying to see if there's another location in that area that would work, or,
right.
Like,
Again, I found out just about the same time you all did. So I think we definitely want it to be a West Side location. And one thing we know for sure, we'll have either signage or a person in the West High Drive routing people to the other location, because it's going to be a challenge to communicate to all of our families at this late hour, the change in venue. Can't be helped, but we're going to do everything we can to route them to a different location. And we'll keep it on the West Side. I'm not sure where that's going to be. I don't know if Chase has ideas, but I don't have anything.
Allison, I don't mean to interrupt, but maybe for Matt, I know that Greg was going to have a communication with all his parents this evening.
Okay.
He may be online as we speak, so it might be an opportunity to get that message out if you get a hold of Greg.
Okay.
And so obviously we don't have, all the questions that, but yes, on the west side, we started to brainstorm a couple of sites. And so we'll just have to put our heads together after this meeting and get that decided, and then either push out a communication early in the morning or still yet this evening on that specific piece. But I think the good news is we do have another production kitchen that we can use, and we have the trucks available to make sure that we can have that site still available. I hate to kind of speculate all of the different possibilities right now, just because I don't want somebody to hear something and then think that's what we're doing. But know that we do know it needs to be there near West. And so that's what we're going to look, is to try to keep it as close to West High as we can.
I've got two questions. First, Allison, thank you for another great week of meals.
Sure.
We didn't go every day, but we did pick up some meals last week, and they continue to be great, high quality, great variety, seamless pickup. Thank you.
Good.
You briefly talked about one of my questions, which was if we're going to move the production kitchen to Liberty, if we could open that up as a pickup site, because again, North Central is kind of the northernmost distribution spot. And so I think a lot of North Liberty families would find Liberty a little more convenient than kind of down into the North Central portion. But the other question, I've been talking up nutrition services, and a common misperception that I'm getting from members of the community is that they would be taking a meal away from a family who needs it if they use the meal service. Could you kind of address that and how it works?
Sure. Everybody is welcome to participate. And I do know that there is still that, I think, misconception that you have to be a free or reduced family to participate. We've been trying to put that out in all of our messaging, that it is indeed for all families, and we encourage all families to participate for any of the reasons that they want to. So we'll continue to push that message. As far as sites, Chase and I and Esme, the transportation manager, we meet weekly to kind of review our sites and what works, what needs to change, or if there are additions to that schedule.
Right, so I think the thing to remember right now, Lisa, on that is, we're only currently moving operations to Liberty temporarily. We fully plan on bringing back to West High starting Monday, but I know it's more related to Allison's comment about running out of storage at North Central. And so what we sent out to parents was any changes to locations, we would notify people of a week in advance so that they don't show up somewhere and there's not meal service. And I didn't want to interrupt earlier when you all were having the long range conversation about teaching and learning, because we're also having that on the upside, because there's a number of those things we have to plan for long term as well. And so we are going to get back together and kind of look at our data over the last 4 weeks, as we know that we're going to do this now this week and 5 more, basically until the end of the school year, to see, are there some of those changes that we need to make in terms of our sites around the community to ensure that we are maximizing our ability to deliver meals. I mean, over 20,000 last week. I think it was actually 22,000 last week, and we're already over 5,000 meals this week. And so, I think it's something we need to explore. But the other thing that we're also looking at, and we've gotten questions on, is what does this program look like after the official last day of school? We've historically had a summer feed program, and so we're going to begin the process of reaching out to some of our partners that we've utilized in that traditional mode that we've used the last several years. But I think something to remember is in the last couple of years, we've averaged about 500 meals a day. And obviously we're averaging,
5,000.
Almost 5,000, right? 10 times that now. And so what does that look like from a capacity issue as we look at summer? So that's one of our things that now we're working on. We've had people reach out from the county, from the business communities asking us. And so we've turned our attention to what does that look like over the summer to help ensure that we continue to feed kids, and along with Paul's comments about what are we doing with our athletic fields. And so trying to look at some of those long range plannings on the upside, as well as something we're starting to do here in the next couple weeks.
No, and thanks for that, Chase, because that was going to be my next question about summer feed. Is I know that we have an end date for school, but for many families, the last day of school and the first day of summer will not look different from each other. You know, we'll still be at home with our kids, telecommuting or what have you. And so I wondered, are we planning for an uptick in summer feed participation? Because I think as parents get into this routine, they may still go to the summer feed sites at the rate that we're seeing now, not at our traditional summer feed rates.
Yes, I think we can anticipate the uptick in that, and that's why we're going to have to really explore what we think are the most viable options for us during the summer. A couple things change. One of the things that's helped us make our program so successful is, you know, the board supporting paying all of our employees through the end of the school year. You know, it takes a lot of staff, even outside of the nutrition services, for us to pull off what we're doing on a daily basis with these meal programs. Those contracts for those employees all end the last day of school. And so we have to go and look at it from a number of different angles of how financially, how do we support this program if we're going to use our internal staff. And obviously that's not the most important component, right? Feeding kids is the most important component, but I think we have to be conscious of that and how the dynamic changes from a couple of different perspectives when we get to the summer. And so that's what we're trying to work through is how does the program that we've traditionally done look differently, knowing that we can't base it on our past summer numbers, but probably have to more base it on the numbers that we've seen. And we'll keep you posted. I don't have that answer quite yet.
I think we would continue to offer the unitized meals like we do now, most likely given the situation. So they would have the 2 meals offered. So we can count on that for sure. And like Amy, I would echo that. I have to give lots of props to my team. They've been fantastic and step up every day and come out and do the heavy lifting, literally, on some of these things. And so it's much appreciated, and I'm very proud of the whole team.
Other questions for Allison or Chase on any of the operations items? Hey, Leon, I just want to say one thing. It's been really wonderful to hear each of you reporting tonight, and you do every week, and you're incredibly gracious about talking about the energy and the passion and commitment that your team members are putting into all the solutions that you all talk about at board meetings. I just want to make sure that y'all are getting the acknowledgement and the recognition too, because you're in the front lines dealing with whatever comes up during the day, and it's multiple things a day, and you're leading your teams, you're collaborating, you're communicating, and you're making things happen. And I just want to recognize each of you too, because you all have really, really hard jobs right now, and you're doing it and performing them extremely well to the benefit of our students and families in the district. So I just want to say thank you, and pace yourselves, because this could be going on for a while, and that it's really important that you take some time to take care of yourself along the way too. This is tough work, and y'all are doing great stuff. So thank you. Unless there's anything,
Jen,
please.
One question. And this is for Matt and Steve probably. Can you just clarify, spring sport coaches still got paid per their contracts, I would assume, even though their sports got canceled? And then the follow-up question, because I've had coaches ask, is if summer sports get canceled, do those contracts they're still valid, or how does that work?
So it's not, sorry, I know you said Matt or Steve, but I think that Nick and I probably have the better information on this, and it's not as simple as a yes or no, Paul. Not every single person that may have coached in the past in some capacity or was slated to potentially coach later this year, but was not either currently under contract or had not been working in other capacity for the school district, is currently slated to get paid for that season. But Nick, do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the parameters we utilized?
Yeah, we worked through a variety of things with our spring coaches in particular. If they were already under contract, had attended orientation and done all the processes that we needed to be a part of the spring sport. We did then continue forward with their compensation. There were some coaches that either didn't have the correct coaching authorization or some other piece of information, or had not completed some pieces to attend orientation, that they are not being paid for their time because the sport was canceled before they were brought on board. So that same thing will happen with some folks in summer if they didn't, if the season was canceled beforehand. But we'll be working through those case by case, and each week the HR team gets together and looks at some different leave or pay scenarios for different people in different groups.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from directors before we move into the action items for the night? Okay, hearing none, we'll move into the action items. So the first up is superintendent's resignation, and Steve has submitted a letter noting his resignation. Before we have a motion in a second to vote on the resignation, I just want to say thank you to Steve for your many, many years of service in our district. We've benefited from your leadership, and it's clear you're leaving the district in a much stronger position than when you started. Your impact is felt across so many, many dimensions of our district, from financials to facilities to equity, the MTSS and PBIS programs, the quality plans and standards you've put into place, and also the incredibly, amazingly strong leadership team that you've assembled, which we're listening to work through this crisis now. And all of those things are your legacy, the strength that you've brought to the district, and you've positioned us for success for many, many years to come. And I just want to say, I wish you the very, very best, your family the very best, and also wish the best to the students, teachers, families, and staff in Green Bay. I know you'll do a great job there, and they're lucky to have you join their team. So any other comments or commentary before we move into the action?
I'll just say I will have some words for you, Steve, but I'm going to save them to your last meeting.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, I'll give some more words too then, but this feels like such a formal thing. I couldn't go without saying a few things. Others want to weigh in?
I would just say I totally agree with everything Janet said, but I won't repeat a lot of that until maybe the last meeting. So we still have several months to work with you, and I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks, Ruthia.
I will also have some more words later, but as I'm sitting here staring at this screen with 25 faces on it, knowing that a lot of those people are on that screen, Steve, because you have brought them in and collected this team, which is pretty amazing. So to echo Janet's sentiment on that, I mean, that's a legacy right there, is all those other little faces I'm seeing on my screen right now. And this is one heck of a mic drop moment going out with this crazy world we're all living in now, as an interesting way to go. So thank you. And I will have more to say later.
I'd just chime in there too. More to say later, and your team speaks volumes of the leadership you've shown here. And yeah, very interesting way to go about this.
I'd like to say, Steve, thank you very much for your service. And just let you know that I've actually learned quite a bit from working with you, sometimes on the opposite side of with you. But I'm looking forward to your continued success in Green Bay too. Thanks.
I'm going to save it for a couple weeks too, Steve, but you should also know that I'm part Irish, and so I get like super teary at these things in a wildly inappropriate way. So get excited for that.
I've got a few weeks to tune up for it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're going to get a big roasting here in a few weeks, Steve. So you have that to look forward to, and we will enjoy continuing to work with you for the next couple months. So thanks, folks. With that, is there a motion to accept the superintendent's resignation?
I move that we accept the superintendent's resignation.
Second.
Thank you. Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open.
I am going to vote yes. For some reason, this computer won't let me log into my board docs.
Thank you, JP. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. Our next item is to appoint our interim superintendent. And as we just made comments about the strength of the leadership team that Steve has assembled here the last few years, this proposed appointment is for one of those team members, Matt Degner, who has served amazingly well in a number of positions in our district, and really pleased to put forward this proposal for appointing Matt. Comments from directors before we move into motions and a vote?
Sure. I think it does say a lot about Steve's leadership, that we have someone that will be able to step into that role. And I have every confidence that, Matt, you will continue to move us forward, but also strengthen your own leadership and create your own leadership style while you serve as the interim. So I'm looking forward to working with you.
Thanks, Justina.
I'll just say too, Matt, that we did talk to a few people about this position, and from community members to teachers that I heard from, your name consistently rose to the top of people that we should be considering without me even saying who we were considering. So I think that's a testament to the work you've done already, and I look forward to continuing to see what you're going to do here in the next year or so. And I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get this next school year off to a good start, and you'll have a year to really do great things for this district.
Thanks, Paul.
As I told Steve, he has a great way to leave the district. You've got a pretty nice way to get started here. We have, as a district, we have pretty high expectations. I think that comes from the board and the administration together, so we have high expectations for the district. So that means we have high expectations for you, but we also have, well, I have every confidence that you're going to be able to meet those expectations. And I too look forward to working with you in this new capacity as you've done great work in your current one.
Thanks. Thanks, Sean.
Okay, I think we're ready for a motion to appoint Matt Degner as our interim superintendent.
I move to appoint Matt Degner as the interim superintendent.
Second.
I think Charlie just beat you by a hair.
Sorry, Lisa.
We've got Ruthina and Charlie. Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open.
I'm also voting yes on this one.
Thank you, JP. Paul, are you keeping us in suspense? Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
That's fantastic. Matt, congratulations. Really, really excited to begin working with you starting in July. Just really, really thrilled. You're going to do just fantastic work, even in the strange conditions that we're working in right now, and really, really excited about the opportunity. So congrats. I feel like we should clap. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Ask Adam if there's a clap thing on here.
That's right. Seriously.
Thank you all very much. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity in the next year ahead, and very appreciative of your support and confidence in me. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, just because people always say it to us after we get elected or while we're running, and they always say, "Are you crazy?" So we just need to make sure that you're not crazy now that you've been named this.
Should I say no comment, or how do you want me to? No, I'm excited about it, and I think we have a lot of great things moving forward here, and looking forward to continue the momentum on a lot of those pieces, and obviously transition us hopefully at some point away from this pandemic situation, but that's front of mind for us all right now, I know. So, but thanks again.
Well, you clearly have the board's full support, Matt, and we're here to help and work with you side by side through all of the things that we have in front of us. So well done and congratulations again. We'll move into agenda setting. Directors, we've got, my internet connection is slowing. My kids must be getting online. It looks like on the 28th, we have a closed session scheduled on a litigation matter, first up on the 28th. And then we have a regular agenda item with a community comment. It looks like we're going to be implementing community comment for the meeting on the 28th. We'll work to do that through our Zoom technology. We have a consent agenda. We've got a number of public hearings. We have a discussion on procedures for continuous learning update. And I think, you know, that's related to the longer term planning regarding our COVID response planning. Do we want to add kind of our standard update items that we've been going through, teaching and learning update, facilities, nutrition, et cetera?
We presume they're incorporated in here, and we thought that would give us the flexibility to provide you just the updates that are relevant when we get to that time next week.
All right, that sounds good. And so anything else from directors that you would like to see in agenda setting in our regular board meeting next Tuesday?
And so Janet and other directors, are we needing to put a Lucas update on the agenda, or will that be added if available?
Yep, I think we've got some information on a Lucas update in our inbox, in our email. Steve, your thoughts on readiness for next week?
I will check with Joe on that. He is our direct contact with Ann Malloy, and if he is ready and or she's got additional information, we will get that added to the agenda.
Okay, great.
I think there was some survey questions going out this week to staff members, and I mean, we might get an update of kind of what was going on there, but I don't know that we'll necessarily have results to be able to talk about next week, but I think we can at least update on some steps that have been taken and are happening, I believe, this week, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Yeah, just a process update to me would be a good idea.
That sounds good. Kim, did you catch that for next week? Thank you. Anything else that folks are going to talk about? I know there was a suggestion. Now that we're lucky and happy to have appointed Matt to the interim role. I know there was some discussion around now perhaps we can start turning our attention to longer term the permanent search process, excuse me. And we can talk in broad strokes about that, but I wanted to pose an idea to the board around maybe in the May timeframe, it would make sense for us to have a board retreat. It's the typical timeframe we would do, probably mid to late May, talking around board goals. How have we done this year? What are we thinking about for next year? And I think, the comments from the last discussion, I think were really relevant around having a very full plate and a lot of initiatives underway. And maybe before we get into any kind of framing out what a process would look like for a full-blown search, maybe we need to take it just an hour as a board, or as long as we need, to kind of look at what those priorities might look like for next year. Along with a search process, but round it out with everything that we have in front of us. And then of course, contingency planning, because we don't know exactly how the COVID-19 will continue to be impacting our district at that point. So I'm just going to pose the question for directors. Would you be open to a board retreat where we can talk about priorities for our summer and our next school year, again, in the context of many unknowns, but just to kind of round out a full picture of the kinds of things that we have in front of us.
I think it'd be very worthwhile to do that.
Other ideas? Does that make sense to kind of, take a little bit of time and talk about a broad set of goals and priorities before we get too specific about any one of them? So maybe an hour in the mid-May timeframe to have that conversation.
I'm very in favor of this because I do think we need to discuss what we have going on, we may not even be thinking about right now, and what the plan is going forward. So yes, I'm in favor of it.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
I am too, Janet. I would almost say maybe we can schedule it for 2 hours. And if we end in an hour, that's great, super efficient. But sometimes the conversations take longer than an hour. And I really think as a board, a good deep conversation is going to be productive.
Yep, I think so too. And often our retreats are 2 hours or more. And so I think that's good. And if we get done, are super efficient, we can get time back on our days. So directors support the idea. Maybe Kim, we can work together to put a doodle poll out for folks, and we can kind of poll and see what would be a good time for everyone to participate. And I think the mid-May timeframe makes sense. We'll get something out to directors, and we can get something on our calendars to have that deeper conversation.
Janet, are you thinking like a Saturday morning kind of it, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think maybe I've actually sort of been liking these, 5 o'clock, board meetings. But I think we can put some ideas out there for maybe late afternoon, early evening, maybe some Saturday ideas, and just see what works best for everybody.
I would I don't know how people feel. I think after these Zoom meetings, to continue on feels like it might be a lot to have a fresh conversation.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I don't know about most of you, but I know I'm still working remotely for the university, and my day is filled with Zoom calls. So if at all possible, I would prefer maybe a Saturday morning, just because I don't work on Saturday typically. But my Monday through Friday, I have no less than maybe 2 hours worth of Zoom calls, and usually later in the day. So sitting in a chair for another 2 hours while I signed up for it would, I would prefer to maybe look at so I'm fresher.
Yeah, fair enough. I've been sitting at my kitchen table since 8 o'clock this morning. Yeah, I'm with you 100% Zoom the entire time. So we'll target sort of weekend dates, but and recognizing that we all have commitments during the day, and so we'll get some options out there for folks to respond to. And then I think also just future, I know that we're looking at an exempt session, not next Tuesday, but the following board meeting, the first one in May. So next week is just a closed session. Our full board meeting, we'll work on scheduling a retreat, and next Tuesday we'll cover the first meeting in May. I think it's May 5th. So anything else, folks, on our agenda setting item?
One thing, and this can, again, I could throw it back to Ruthina, and this could be a doodle poll, but we need to schedule our next P&G meeting.
Kim and Steve are working on getting a doodle poll out for that.
Okay. And then I would like to, I think we kind of touched on it last week. I don't remember, I don't know. I kind of space out sometimes watching Zoom meetings, but I don't think we talked about it this week. But I would like to chat a little bit about some sort of graduation, whether it's virtual or whatever, talk about what we can do for our seniors. I'm so glad that my children are, I have a junior and a freshman, so they get a do-over, next year. It just breaks my heart thinking about what our seniors are missing. And I just kind of want to know, what are we going to do for them, or what can we do for them, however small it is. I think they deserve it, and we kind of owe them something. And so I'd like to kind of talk about that probably maybe at the next just kind of update at next meeting or the week after or something like that. We have a
I was
few
gonna say,
weeks.
if I
but-
could jump in here, Sean, I think next week we should have some kind of parameter around what we think that could look like, because that was a big topic for us today, and we wanted to do a couple things to try to allow parents and kids to give some voice into what are those kind of things that are important to them, you know, that we might be able to try to preserve or might be able to do. You know, what could a long-term option look like? What was something in May that we could do? Because I think that's important that, you know, May was when it was supposed to happen. You know, something we should do to recognize the culmination of the school year and the effort that those seniors put into that. And so we talked about some exploratory plans for that today to try to do some research on options and come back. And so I would think in a week, you know, we could give you a pretty good idea of what we're considering, what that would look like. Because I think that is a very important one. And it, like you said, just, you know, it's a crushing thing for the students that don't get to have that opportunity to go through that in the same way that past classes have. So we'll definitely provide you an update on that next week.
I'll just, one recommendation, if we do that virtually, everyone should crank their heat up to about 95 in their house so that they get a good sweat, because they don't want to miss out on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Matt. I know that, you know, all of the board members that have, you know, been on for, you know, at least the last year, right, have had the chance to hand out diplomas to seniors, right, and enjoy that experience. And it's pretty awesome. And I appreciate Paul's been really good at helping us put together like lists of, you know, signing up for specific students that you want to hand diplomas to. And, you know, I've had a handful in the past years, but this year I kind of counted up about 70 Liberty seniors that I personally wanted to hand a diploma to. And, you know, that's a huge thing that, for those seniors, but, you know, it's kind of the, you know, a nice perk for us too. So that's a really fun experience, and I hope we can pull something off one way or another. It'd be great.
I wonder if we're going to find a platform for community comment, if we could also invite our 4 high school reps to come and talk to us next week and maybe provide us some input about what they would like graduation to look like, or just give us a student perspective on what's going on and how just in general they're dealing with things. I also wonder if we could get an update on Battelle. Like, and if I have missed this, then I'm sorry, but have we just scrapped it for the year and we're going to set everything for the fall? Or where are we with that? Because if we are going to set it for the fall, I'd like to get on their schedule now so we can get those dates and reform the core community group that's going to participate.
We've been engaged with them in terms of they shut down their operation and took all their folks off the road. And so we've been in constant contact with them about re-engaging in the fall. And remember, we only had one meeting with them. So part of the conversation that Colin and I had was whether we start the entire process over again from session 1. That's our initial thought process on it right now. And so then our last dialogue was about an appropriate start time. And one of the things I shared with him is, depending on when we start the school year, we probably want to make sure that we get at least a few weeks into the school year so that we've got the opportunity to advertise and get people re-engaged. So we talked about beginning of October into September as a potential start date for that. So we're working on that with
them. Other thoughts from directors on agenda? Okay, hearing none. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, folks. Have a good rest of your day. Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.